So I'm really happy today to welcome the wonderful Roger Richards and Tash Sidoti, and they're here to talk to us today about a wonderful new initiative for education, which is so needed in the world at the moment. So I really love to support these types of initiatives. This is the Homeschool Revolution. And what's the logo there in the back? Put the magic, what is it, Rog?
Put the magic back into children's learning.
Beautiful. I love that.
Because
So I'm loving to hear all about this. So go ahead, both of you, whoever would like to speak first, and just fill us in on this wonderful new educational thing that the world needs at the moment so much. So thank you.
Well, I'll just introduce myself a little bit first of all, so you know a little bit about who you're speaking with and listening to. I've been a teacher in education for over 16 years now, and I've taught in both mainstream, and I'm also Steiner trained. And I've taught in both private schools and government schools in New South Wales and Victoria, good old Melbourne down there. And I've been very lucky to have well, not lucky, but I stood up to the mandates that were placed here in Sydney by, the powers that be, the dark powers that be, and said, no, thank you, and there must be a better option. And to cut a long story short, I ran into this lovely lady here, Tash, who's part of this amazing community that we've put together. And part of this journey as a teacher is seeing and understanding the issues that are within the education system, understanding the nature of it, and then the nature of what we are now putting together. So, and Tasha has a very different background, but I'll pass over.
Oh, fill us in. Yes, we'd love to hear.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you for having us on your podcast. It's just a joy to be here, and I already feel better. I don't know if you guys feel that way, but when you're around like-minded people, it really lifts the spirits. So it's really lovely just to connect. Thank you, Roger. Yeah, we have quite different backgrounds, but they intersect really beautifully. I'm a naturopath and nutritionist and a mum of 3. And I have really come to appreciate the intersection between mind, body, spirit health with naturopathy and this homeschooling revolution with the Steiner philosophy and the spirit of the Steiner philosophy captured through that. And it really makes a lot of sense to me as a naturopath how wonderful this is, not just for the nervous system, but for the capacity to really learn deeply.
Yes. And kids have that facility, don't they? That they're so open to learning when they're young that they would really make the most of that, wouldn't they?
That's right. And that openness can be for better or for worse. So yes, they're incredibly open and porous, and it's a beautiful quality. So we need to nurture it and really respect and treasure that. And a lot of parents may agree to this, often in kindy and even year 1 in a mainstream school environment, which was the environment my children were in until this year. That perhaps kids, as you say, they're so keen to learn, they're excited to go to school, they're excited about homework. But then what can happen is that enthusiasm, that spark, that joy just kind of tapers right down to the point that a lot of students that may have initially appeared to have potential can look disillusioned, disengaged, and basically disinterested.
Well, it's not really catering to the energy and the frequency, the vibration, or the spiritual standing of children coming in today. They don't resonate with the old system. It's like 100 years old, and it's based around very narrow perspectives on the 3 R's and things like that, and it's keeping them in a robotic form of learning, which is memorizing, and it doesn't allow a child to activate their inner gifts, their personal unique talents, their spiritual abilities, their connection to their inner world. There are so many ways that the education system falls down right now for all the children that are coming in. They're not matched. They don't match together. And so, what are your thoughts about the system that I feel is basically in a form of deconstruction now? It's falling apart, and it no longer serves people. And we can see that really clearly with all the the infiltration of the pharmaceutical medical intervention in schools as well. So what's your thoughts on the old system, both of you, and why it falls down?
I'll let you go first, Roger.
Okay, now you've touched on the medical system here, and there's a very strong parallel that people aren't aware of between what the Rockefellers did to the health system to make it a pharmaceutical system, and to really deny people such as Tash the natural wisdom that belongs in medicine, but they have tried to remove. And if anyone's not aware of what Rockefeller did to medicine, just Google it up and you'll find the narrative there. And there's a parallel narrative in the education system. And we're actually seeing this now with the agenda that's coming through the curriculum, with all the sexualized content that's coming through in particular. And it's not coming from the teachers, it's not coming from the educators, it is coming from another source and being pushed through the system.
Government?
Yeah, and probably forces above the government who the government are in their pockets.
Yeah.
Now, and the other problem with education, and we're going to touch, and Tasha's going to help us out with the holistic benefits that are not in education at the moment, because within the system of education, we honour the intellect and we pump the child full of information and facts and figures. There is nothing in there that educates the soul of the child and the heart forces of the child.
And also the facts and figures that they're being taught are, not actually truth a lot of the time. We're finding out more and more that our true reality has been hidden from us. So what we have been given is based on a globalist agenda for what they're wanting to perpetuate. That's not even truth a lot of the time.
Well, colonial history has always been a feature of the system here that's slowly changing. And within that, again, the absence of the soul and heart forces to the people who've lived here for 50, 60,000 years. It's only just being brought in by the warm-hearted, conscientious teachers, despite the system. Bringing that.
And I know, can I mention too, Roger, in terms of what you're just talking about, I tried to do meditation in schools and there was so much red tape and regulations and everything. I just gave up. It's just impossible to get holistic things like that into the system. So it actually keeps you out of the system.
Okay, so this is a little bit more insidious, but I'll touch on this in a moment. But the other thing that is devoid from the system entirely is the aspect of our spirit. So we are mind, body and soul. They've cut out the soul and they've cut out the spirit on the premise of religion, which is a very different thing to our spiritual connection. So we're seeing a whole generation of children coming through our education system that we've handed over to other adults, where it's devoid of soul, devoid of spirit. What is the outcome for human beings with that?
Not good.
And the other thing that I want to touch on here is the quantum field that is powerful within a school system. Now, this is something that Max Planck educated Einstein on at a physics conference 100 years ago. And he said to Einstein at this conference, he said, "What do you think is the biggest variable in a laboratory experiment?" And Einstein reeled off all this stuff and Max said, no. He said, what's in the mind and soul of the person conducting the experiment in the laboratory, the power of the quantum field. And people like Dr. Emoto have since demonstrated this. The HeartMath Institute have demonstrated this, along with, Bruce Lipton's work. Most people are aware of Professor Bruce Lipton and how he works. It's the same principle. And another person who knew of this was Rudolf Steiner.
Can I also say my Healy it works in the quantum field. It's a quantum Healy frequency device. So it reads the quantum field. Same thing.
So in a nutshell, the quantum field of a school is that of regulation, compliance, assessment, and then learning outcomes, which are in many cases quite inappropriate. And we can go into that a little bit more detail. But that, and on the other level on that is the teachers in the room who are also highly stressed, working under the threat of litigation. Most of the compliance and regulations due to the litigation threat. Overworked, overstressed, and often the experienced teachers cannot be afforded by the government schools because of budget constraints, and they manage out of the system. The young graduates are brought in, they're much more, much cheaper, more economical to have. And they can't handle the high incidences of ADHD, autism, and the other learning needs that are coming into the system, the behaviour. So that is where the children, many of our children are at the moment. And Tash, I'm not sure if you've seen any of this coming through your practice, through the adults and children you're dealing with.
Exactly. So I completely agree with the Rockefeller parallel through medicine and then through education. The concepts are the same, the context is different. And when it comes to what's happening medically in school, even before the COVID narrative, there were already things happening. For example, over-medicalisation of children and over-diagnosis of certain behavioural disorders. So the big pharma was there even before COVID. This is just another extension of that. I have clients who are teachers and students alike and incredibly stressed. It seems to be normalised that a majority of teachers seem to be on antidepressants or anxiety medication, and it's almost a joke within the industry. They're incredibly stressed, and as Roger said, they're trying their best, but if the system around them is toxic, it's pushing mud uphill. It's impossible, actually. And as Roger also said, a lot of the experienced teachers are being pushed out of the system.
And often they go because they're good people and they care about children and they want to help them, so they go in with this wonderful noble spirit, and the whole system is basically corrupted, so it can't support them to do what they want to do, which is allow children to flourish and be at their highest potential.
And that same comment probably applies to some people in politics and medicine as well. They may start with benevolent, beautifully generosity of spirit intentions. They may be there. However, if the actual system is designed for it to go in another direction, it will always win. A lot of children are incredibly stressed about either achieving enough and fitting in, or feeling like there's just no point. There's this sense of shame and failure. It seems to be sort of one or the other. I see a lot of high achievers and I see children that are not fitting the mold, and they're both unhealthy and they're both unwell. And the teachers have no balance in their day. They don't have time to hydrate or eat properly. So they have gut health issues. They have lots of UTIs. They're on antidepressants as well. They're underslept. So as Roger was talking about the quantum field, that's what's coming through them in the classroom as well.
Awful. And the other thing on top of that, you've got the impacts that we're hearing about more and more every day of this, that's happening with health adverse reactions, and that's another layer of nefariousness that's happening out there. And then you've got the whole system really is basically boiling down to a system that is designed to support a very small sort of narrow margin of students that are able to memorize and work in a way that is sort of like pushing them to be part of the system and to be able to not think independently, but just to learn through being told, not to question the system, all these sorts of things. And then all the other children outside that spectrum are just left unattended on some level. So yeah, it's purposely designed that way, isn't it?
So there you have in a nutshell, Medine, why according to some stats, 90% of the population just rolled over and accepted the narrative that was rolled out by the mainstream media, because we've been not educated we're being conditioned
Yeah.
to
go along with.
to conform, to comply,
Yes.
not to question, because they're the authority. They know we've followed the authority all through our education system.
Yes. We were very highly trained to do that, weren't we?
Yeah.
And on top of that, you add the fluoride, which makes you controllable and compliant and passive, so that you don't disagree or argue. So you've got other things like that on top of it as well.
I taught at one of the Steiner schools here fairly recently, and I thought one of the most lovely things to do for children was to ground them and for them to take their shoes and socks off and to walk on the manicured lawn of our suburban school grounds here. And I got chastised. I thought the first time was just a little tap on the shoulder, but the third time they were serious. Sorry, you can't do that. That's not allowed. It's against the education department regulation. So he got these children in a fairly compliant-based system, and they're not allowed to connect to Mother Earth physically.
No. I did that with my own kids, and I put them in the system. I'm sorry to say, when they were young, I didn't realize all the things that I know now. And I took them at one time to this muddy sort of park, and there was just like mud everywhere. And I go, just go for it, go and have fun, play in the mud, and they just cried. They were a bit indoctrinated through school and everything, not to to stay clean and not get dirty, and it was like,
Come on, Tash, why should the children be out there in the mud? Come on, let us know.
Exactly, thank you. That's the cheapest probiotic there is. It's full of beautiful microbes. It's a free spa treatment then and there. One of my passions is the microbiome, not just in the gut. It's the microbiome, or the microbes that are in and on us. It's an entirely symbiotic relationship, and it's what I specialize in clinic. So when you're in a sterile environment like a classroom or an office, or you have a lifestyle that's very indoors based, your exposure to microbes is much more reduced, and the variety of bugs that you're exposed to are the sort of bugs that survive strong cleaning products. So are they the sort of bugs that you want to have dominating in your microbiome? When you're outside, you actually improve your gut microbiome diversity simply by inhaling a variety of microbes. So the mud is just another level over and above that.
And with all the lockdowns, they've been trying to separate us and keep us in our own contained area. So when the same thing goes, doesn't it, for when you interact with another person, your body builds immunity, it builds strength, and so they're trying to cut back on that as well.
There is strength and unity on the micro and the macro, and part of the concepts that we've been talking about with politics, education, medicine, it's all about isolating the individual and creating a really unhealthy level of toxic dependence.
Yeah.
So feeling sovereign, feeling well, feeling connected, independent thought, they're all big threats to those goals, no matter what the context is that we're talking about.
Yeah, and we haven't even done it yet, Charles. But anyway,
but parents need to be aware of what's going on and what the holistic alternatives are out there.
Yes.
And I often had children in my class who had learning difficulties. One of the first questions I would ask is, how are they sleeping at night? And majority of them weren't sleeping very well. And I therefore wondered, well, maybe I should speak to a naturopath and find what the solution to this sleep issue is. Natasha, can you help us out on this one?
Yeah, so you're right, Roger. Sleep is terrible for young people and adults alike. Big part of that is not having enough time in natural light. So our night and day, it's called your circadian rhythm, is really dysregulated. Over and above that, as you guys have mentioned, stress levels are higher than ever because pressure is higher than ever. So we've got dysregulated circadian rhythm compounded by high cortisol levels, which is going to suppress your natural melatonin synthesis in the evening, which is your important sleep hormone. It's also a really important anti-inflammatory hormone. It's a really healthy hormone for other reasons. Screens are the best way to disrupt your sleep.
EMF, radiation.
As well. Yeah, so turning the screen off and also turning your Wi-Fi off at night, and whenever you're not using it is a big thing. When you're in the school environment, you've got all of that all around you. The school I just took my children out of here in the Northern Beaches, a public school, now has a 5G tower just opposite on the other side of the road.
They intentionally put them next to nursing homes and schools and shopping centres.
Wow.
It's deliberate. Yeah.
So therefore, what happens when their bodies are topped up with aluminium in medications, and they're put next to a tower like that? What's going in?
Well, heavy metals are one problem, but also there are other excipients. They're the inactive ingredients that stabilize the active ingredient that your detoxification systems don't know how to process because they're inorganic. What is that? How do I process that? I don't know. So instead of excreting it, I'm going to store it in a stable cell, like a fat cell, where it will be less mobile. But if you continue to store things in these cells, you're going to get toxin overload. It can eventually cross your blood-brain barrier, lead to leaky gut, chronic issues, autoimmune diseases, behavioral disorders like ADHD, depression and anxiety.
Is that like graphene dioxide, things like that?
Graphene dioxide is even more disturbing, being that it's carbon-based and seems to be very magnetic in its behavior. So even as a naturopath, I'm talking to colleagues, we're still learning how do we bind to this and get it out of the system. And we're not sure. We're trying different strategies. It's very hard to quantify. And it's unique, and it's microcircuitry. There was a good Spectator article actually on it about 4 weeks ago. I was really delighted to see that in mainstream media around the graphene dioxide being looked at under microscope. And it looks like little robotic carbon fibers that distribute and then reconnect, distribute, reconnect.
Yes.
And they will interact with the EMF that you were talking about, Nadine.
Yes, and it was in a bottle of water, actually. It was there was a clip of it in water. So when they looked at the water, when I think they might have put it under a flame or something like that, they could see the I always thought it was graphene oxide. Is it dioxide? Graphene dioxide.
Dioxide, yes.
Okay, I've been saying it wrong. So
it's very similar. Yeah.
So they could see it in these bottles of water, and it's hidden from us because you can't see unless it's been put under heat. So
yeah.
It's in so many things now too. Again, part of the system that has with the the Monsanto food, GMO foods and all that sort of thing. A lot of the ingredients of those are hidden and they're, again, quite nefarious. It sounds like we're being paranoid, but, all these things are being proven more and more all the time. And
and you can feel overwhelmed going, why bother? It's just, what's the point? It's everywhere. So I guess my response to that is, what we're doing here with this homeschooling community, being stronger and being outside is one way to strengthen your sovereignty. Another way is to really make sure your detoxification pathways are strong. Get a filter or be the filter is usually how it goes. So as much as you can, you minimize exposure, but we won't minimize or avoid everything. So you strengthen yourself in every aspect of your life as best as you can.
Yes.
So that, once again, your critical thinking, your alertness, your cognition is also at its optimal.
And your immune system. Yeah. So I'd like to chat now because we've made really good groundwork foundation for what the issues are that we're dealing with. I think we can't sort of deny that there's some things we're working with here. So I guess the next point is, please tell us about the homeschool revolution that you have set up, how it works, what is involved, and perhaps some of the results that you're getting from it as well.
Okay, I'll touch on how it came together because I did have a part in this, and this is when we're all in the phase of lockdowns. My intuition told me that I wouldn't go back to the system, regardless of mandates. The system was broken, and I didn't want to go back. And I thought, what is the option? What are the alternatives here? And we looked at a combination of different things with different colleagues who were like-minded and very freedom-minded, and at a freedom rally here in Sydney, a number of us connected with fellow teachers, and there was a community from a nearby Steiner school who were very strong in their values, and thought this isn't okay. We have to build something new. We can't fix something that's broken, that's a beast from within. We have to do something new.
Yeah.
And one of the pioneers of this group was homeschooling, but realised it was very isolating for her children. And the other thing is the amount of work or content that you should ideally bring really can be shared.
How do parents do that? I mean, it's probably not really practical for most parents to be able to do all that, go through all those curriculums and follow the regulations and do all that.
So the two basic choices in New South Wales and Victoria at the moment, I guess all of Australia, is you either place your children into an institution called a school, or you do home learning, which the view of that here by the department is that the parents homeschool their child within the confines of their home and essentially deny a lot of professional support and social interaction. Now, there are a number of homeschool networks around where the parents do a lot of the teaching themselves, and then they'll go out and socialise for certain events. But what we have come to do is put it all together. We've got a combination of parents with a broad range of skills who are very highly organised, very resourceful, and a number of very experienced educators who then work within a learning hub in the area that we are based. We're based on the northern beaches of Sydney. There are similar groups on the northern rivers of New South Wales. There's two similar groups, one that's established down on the peninsula, Mornington Peninsula in Melbourne.
And I think I know who runs it, Julie.
Okay.
She's a friend of mine.
And another one setting up very close to the CBD in Melbourne as well, for anyone who's interested. You can, for anyone who's interested anyway, homeschool revolution at outlook.com. You can email me. I'll drop that on the link anyway later on. So we spreading the word on like-minded groups through Telegram, Signal, Facebook, etc. And Tash, I'm not sure exactly where you heard the call.
Well, it started at a protest.
Oh, you're there.
As they all do.
Yeah. So isn't it backfiring for certain agendas when you push people into a corner, they get more creative?
I've heard this a lot, actually.
and more courageous.
Yeah.
So I did meet one of the wonderful educators at a protest, and it went from there and then went to an information gathering about it, where I was just so emotional because I was also exposing myself for the first time to the Steiner philosophy. So it wasn't just the COVID narrative is wrong. It was also around, like you, Medine, I had my kids in a mainstream school, and I had some concerns, but I really didn't see the big picture. So it was quite an emotional experience. I felt quite teary just listening to the way that the child is held and seen, and I had a little cry for my own education experience because, God, I would have loved something like this when I was younger as well.
Yes, I did actually go to train as a primary school teacher many years ago, because I love kids and I like to work with kids, and there weren't many other avenues. But I became aware of what the curriculum was and what the focus was, and I just couldn't do it because it had no spiritual component like Roger was talking about.
Yeah, wow, good on you. Absolutely, much respect for that. So what we did was we took a leap of faith. The oppressive ultimatum of last year catapulted us into making a choice we never thought we would make. My husband and I both work as well. Neither of us are particularly patient. So there's that. So this, as Roger said, is all of those concepts brought together where you're not isolated and alone. It's not on one parent whilst the other parent is breadwinning. We're very organised with timing. We've arranged our work schedule around it. And what's happened is the lifestyle balance has been better than ever for everyone.
Oh, that's good. How many people are involved in it at this point?
In short, not enough.
We'll change that. We'll
Look,
put it out there. Okay.
look, there's a couple of groups here in Sydney, and probably the size would be, you know, in the late teens to like early 20s, which is a good manageable cohort to have given the resources we have. But we're also getting a lot of demand now for high school, because this is where a lot of the stress and a lot of the burnout is coming through. And for anyone who wants to have a look at the reasons into this, Gabor Mate is a trauma and psychological specialist who deals with a lot of children and student issues. He's got a book out. He's got a lot of content on YouTube that talks about what happens to the subconscious and the psyche of the child, you know, pre-birth, antenatal, and then by the parents dropping their kids into early childcare centres, and what happens to the sense of abandonment and the stress that it puts in the subconscious. Then all of this gets triggered through the high school in particular.
Wow.
You know, the students feel abandoned in the high school with the workload, the irrelevant content, and the quantum field that they're placed in without the spirit-soul connection. That's right. They're lost. It's a generation lost.
Yeah,
absolutely. I when I did year 12, I got glandular fever, and I got it partly because I was so stressed. My parents were pushing me, saying, "You got to do better. You got to study. You got to do your homework." And there's so much stress placed on, you know, the exams and all that sort of thing, and it's just too much for kids to deal with. And then, as you say, you know, this habit of it's actually from isn't it from the Charles Dickens era, where they were put in factories, kids? You know, it's the same sort of idea of putting them in institutions away from the home, the loving home, supportive environment, where they're disconnected from the loved ones and the parents that love them, and then they become more controllable and also more dysfunctional within themselves, so that the system can, you know, utilize them in their own way.
And that dysfunction further feeds into more profit.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
They feed the system by, you know, getting jobs and staying as good slaves 9 to 5 in their jobs during the week, because the whole system's set up to get them into that routine of, you know, basically, you know, those long hours being away from home. And yeah, so it's you know, now I won't say how old I am. I'm pretty old, but when I was at school, I used to always look at the windows, because I feel like I was in prison, and I just feel like I was out of the school. And now, do you know the trauma of that energetically? Because I'm a real free spirit, as I'm sure you both are, and you know, light workers, healers, all these types of people that we connect with, freedom fighters, we all feel the same. I still, on some subconscious level, think every day, I'm so glad I don't have to go to school.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible? I've just consciously thought that, but it's like in the back of my mind is, oh my God, I've got to go to school and I've got to fit in. And not only was it fitting in with the routine of, you know, getting up and going there physically, but it was also quite a sort of a hostile environment among the children when you go to school. You know, there's a lot of dysfunction, a lot of hostility, there's bullying, there's all that sort of thing, which of course, as we know now, has pretty much been exacerbated with a lot of online bullying and all that sort of thing. And with all the transition of the earth going through the last 2 years, I'm sure that it's even more magnified. So, so many other things. Yeah.
I'd like to share a little situation with you that we encountered, and this is why our numbers are a little bit low, but we went through a situation during our winter period here where we were essentially the homeless school revolution. And because of various circumstances, we didn't have a place we could really settle, and we spent a lot of time outside in nature, natural reserves and places, which had its struggles initially. But then what happened, we ended up at a beautiful home, and the first day that we went into our learning spaces within 4 walls, we all wanted to get back outside again, and it was right across. And it's amazing how we've been conditioned to being inside 4 walls And
You-
what happens when you go out there? There's a balance. There is a balance.
I have a grounding mat that I'm sitting on right now. So when I'm working PMFs, I'm grounding my energy the whole time, just to put your feet on Mother Earth and to ground your energy. It gets rid of inflammation in the body. It does so many things, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and just to be able to do that and be outside in that learning environment. I'm sure that the children took in the information much better. I reminds me of the Yogananda, books. What is it? Biography of a Yogi by Yogananda, and he started their own schools, and a lot of them were outside, and they would just teach meditation and things. And the superpowers and the abilities that these kids had were absolutely out of this world. They were phenomenal.
Yes.
Those sorts of things are so inspiring when you read these other models. And the other one that comes to mind is the Anastasia books of the schools in Russia, where the children would go in and they'd help build the school, and they'd learn all these abilities, and they'd love it. And they'd love it so much that when the holidays came, they didn't want to have a holiday. They just want to go to school and keep learning, because it was so inspiring and stimulating.
That's beautiful. But not only are they learning more deeply when they're out in nature, it's not just the content that they're learning more deeply, their nervous systems are more coherent.
Yeah.
So that allows for that stress response to subdue, and they can truly absorb the content on a level that's beyond the memorization that you were highlighting earlier, Nadine. So it's a deep understanding.
Yes.
Even if their exam result could be similar to someone that's been in a different system, that deep knowledge stays with them. It's not just in the brain and then out the next day. And their sleep is better. Yes. So they come home. It's after that school experience, when they come home, they're content.
Yes.
And so what we ended up doing was dropping almost all of our extracurricular activities because they were content. So that's another part of the system that you're pulled into. And as a parent, you feel so guilty if you haven't enrolled your child in X, Y, and Z as well. Particularly for us, if you times it by 3 kids, you're a taxi for the week.
Yes.
Yeah. So the balance of lifestyle that came beyond the school hours was beautiful. So it's this ripple effect into all other aspects of your life.
Because I think what has happened in the past is with parents, they've booked them, as you say, into all these different after school activities, tennis, swimming, and on it goes. And so what happens is the child is in sort of like a nervous, their nervous systems are overstimulated, and they are they get stressed, like you say, very easily, because they're doing too much. They can't integrate it all. They can't take it all in. And it's just go, nonstop. And, everyone needs quiet times when they're just able to sit still and do nothing and integrate. And children very much so as well. And I think that's completely forgotten in the current system that we've been dealing with.
Well, stress is also addictive. So those hormones that are produced when we're stressed are addictive. So even if you want to circuit break it, it's uncomfortable, especially at first. So, yes, they're busy, but watch them try to be still.
Yes.
Watch them be okay with nothingness and settle into boredom for a little while. The nervous system panics.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the overstimulation of the screens. There's so many things that we need to take into consideration to be able to really benefit our children today. Anastasia talks about how they were teaching in these schools that the children love concepts for how to be in the world and how to think about the world, and how to just be able to look at a flower and the petals in a flower and the whole beauty and the sort of the secrets and the wisdom of the universe would come through the reflection of just looking at a flower.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Tash, this is something you've got to look forward to next week, because we're actually designing a festival for our end of year, and it is really bringing children back into the nature spirits and the elemental beings of Mother Nature and Earth, even to the point of building soundscapes of the Australian bush.
Oh, wow.
And then to move it almost in the way of traditional dance, how it was done in this country as well. Perfect. And we've got a fantastic ditch player coming to support us.
Yes,
as well.
amazing. So good.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll leave the details below the video as well for that festival. That sounds fantastic. I love all that nature stuff. You know, frogs. I've got a video of frog noises, and they actually, what they do is that this low level sound that they make transmutes the heaviness and the density of the earth plane and
Oh, wow.
to light. Yeah. So, you know, there's a gift in every sound in nature. And in every bird song, you know.
Nadine, there's an important picture I'd like to share with people on here, particularly who are used to energy work or light work.
Yes.
And this is what happens to young children in early childhood, is that we're trying to push, in particular, literacy down lower and lower and lower into the early years. And the way that it is taught is exclusively through the intellect and through decoding, before the children have built up a very strong oral language base, and before they have built up a comprehension base as well. So in the way that we teach more through oral language and storytelling, and the storytelling itself is medicine. It is the meditation, and it takes the children into this other realm. And what it does, working with the imagination, it fuels the chi force through the body.
Beautiful.
And if you do it the opposite way, as they do in the mainstream, where it's just decoding and facts and information, it traps the energy of the body basically in the head. So therefore, what's happening to the development of the soul, the circulation and the respiratory system and the heart forces of the child, when the energy is trapped up here? And you cannot educate the soul through a worksheet or a discourse on kindness. You actually have to go and do it. You have to give, you have to sing, you have to do the poetry, feel the warmth.
Didn't they, with their dream, the way that they conveyed information was never through books, it was always through spoken and oral and passed down between generations, wasn't it, with the original people and that sort of thing.
So this is the kind of qualities that we're bringing through to the children in homeschooling, because we're allowed to, well, we can.
Yeah.
And we will, because it's right. It is the thing to do. And then we've got the understanding and the knowledge of a very skillful set of parents who can then augment the educational direction with the whole village raising a child and bringing the child back into the community, this sense of family. Where we, in New South Wales, we have to call grandparents grand friends now in the school system, apparently. Wow, so I don't know if you saw that one on Sky News.
So ridiculous. I got no use for that.
But they're trying to pull the family structure apart, we are putting it back together.
Brilliant. That's so wonderful. You know, the ability to tap into children's unique gifts and abilities, and to just really focus on allowing them to bring them out naturally. That is what's happening in schools. And, you know, for me, I was very creative. I love dancing. I love singing, you know, writing songs and writing books. I made a little newspaper when I was little and gave it out to kids for 5 cents, I think it was. And, you know, those creative things that kids would love to do naturally anyway. And just to really, you know, nourish those and to bring those out, you know, that's completely missing, you know, in the school systems now. And of course, they've cut back, haven't they, on the arts and all that sort of thing as well, because they have to stick to the curriculum and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
That reminds me of something I've seen happen in the house a lot. Since the kids have been a year learning this way now, my daughter in particular is writing, she's 8, she's writing notes of gratitude to people throughout the house. It's really quite beautiful and poetic. And at night, before we eat our meal, we say what we're grateful for the day. And the kids actually say, hey, we forgot to do it if we forget to do it. So they're initiating it now.
Oh, I love that, Tash. I had a healing centre in Victoria, and we had a gratitude wall. And so when people had a session or a group, I'd have a heart and they'd write in what they were grateful for and then put it on the wall. And I'll put a picture here of it as well.
That's gorgeous.
Lots of colours.
Yeah. So Nadine, there's a couple of things I'd like to appeal to people who are watching this. is first of all to spread the word that there are alternatives to the school system and also alternatives to home learning, where we can develop networked hubs with professional educators. Another thing that I'd like people to do, if they've got connections, particularly political ones, because there are some political people who are aligned to this, is that if you have a child in a school system, the funding, if it's a government school, they're entitled to about $15,000 a year, which goes through the school system. Private schools about $6,000 to $8,000. If you are homeschooling, you get zero. So we need to appeal to the people in these places to fund or support people who are homeschooling, so they can pay for resources and give the skills to the children that they're otherwise not getting. It still saves. If they afforded $5,000 per child in homeschooling, there's still 10 grand in front from a government school.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think, the way that the government's going at the moment, it's sort of really no longer valid for the way society wants to continue. So it seems like we're going to have to create new, well, they do talk about a whole new financial system coming in, quantum system that will have all the funding, I would imagine, for these types of things. And, the humanitarian projects they talk about in the future that will be funded, it's the same thing. But I guess in the meantime, you've got to find ways to fund it now. Do you find that the government listened to your requests at this time?
I've emailed Dominic Perrottet twice, the Premier here, and I just get the blank response, get referred back to the Education Department here, who won't listen to people who are outside the box to begin with, and we do not fit the paradigm of the department. And the reason that education is in the state that is, in the condition that it is at the moment, is because of the department. So they've got their mindset. They're a big, heavy, fixed institution that has to work in a certain way. We're working outside that. We have to work outside their quantum field as such to have the freedom. Absolutely. And this is the difference, and this is what I'm asking. Do you want your children educated within the quantum field of compliance and regulation, or do you want your children brought up in the ethos of freedom? Because it goes into the soul forces of the child. Exactly. And this is one of the things that we are giving the spirit and the soul back to the children, along with enriched learning experiences, practical experiences connected to the real world as such.
There's nothing more important than giving that to the generation that's coming.
And even for those that come out of the system and find their spirit, what a grueling process that can be. And is that always the necessary path where, not everybody comes out of it unlearning and finding their way again?
No, that's true. Absolutely. You've just got to look at the levels of depression and so forth in young kids as a consequence, and anxiety and all those sorts of things. So what other things can you recommend for people? So I'll put all the links below and that sort of thing. We have the festival coming up. Do you think it's a good idea for them to go into their communities and talk to other people, and maybe even they can talk to you guys and connect to you and talk about ways, if they can't access where you are in your systems, to create their own in places around Australia?
Well, we do. Look, between us, we do know of different hubs that are already set up and working very well. And there are others there are a lot of parents with children, but they don't necessarily have the educators or how to bring the heart and soul back in to education or into the learning with their children. And that's something that there's a collegiate of us around Australia who do this, and we do it online. There's online support. But if you happen to be on the northern beaches of Sydney, come and get in contact and we'll come and hang out a bit and work with you that way.
And to the parents, if they want to chat more around the logistics and the how, I'm more than delighted to offer some support, because we genuinely didn't think we could do it with us both working. But it is possible, especially if you find people and you manage to share responsibilities between you as a community. It ends up being a pleasure, and I actually really enjoy going a few hours a week to be with the community, because it feels good for my spirit as well.
Yes, is that something perhaps that had been missing in the past, that sense of like-minded community that you're actually able to create now through this whole, 2 years of, lockdowns? We've had to find other ways, and we've had to connect to our spiritual tribe. So is that something perhaps was absent before, but you're getting that more and more now? Because it's a real
problem. Yeah. I used to avoid drop-offs in the mainstream school and that day-to-day chat. I'd go, I duck and weave conversations because I found them, what's the word? Infuriating.
Yes.
To be honest, I just felt like, what are we doing? Whereas, especially over the last 2 years.
Yes.
Especially, my children actually had an experience. I sent them to school when it was lockdown. Yeah. And they weren't wearing masks, but their teachers were always wearing them. And there was actually one incident where the teacher threw a chair, shouting at the kids, saying that because of them, he could get sick. And the only good children there were the ones that had been vaccinated.
Yeah.
That actually happened.
Yeah.
So I just thought we've got to get out of this and beyond COVID, because that's fizzling out. There's just going to be the new narrative over the top of that soon. It was good that it happened because it's just a not negotiable for me.
Exactly. Pushing people to create a new way of society, isn't it? Which is what most of us are wanting to go, that are aware that the old system is completely broken.
We've still got the discrimination going on. We've just had a new family approach us because of that within the school system, and it's amongst the staff as well as amongst the students as well.
Yeah.
And I know if I went and returned back to my old place of employment, there would be fingers pointing and hushed words on. He's back, that one,
Yeah. I knew a teacher who left the system, and she says they were making claims that they would say she was, mentally unwell because she chosen not to have this, and put that against her. So,
that's the College of Physicians in Ontario, Canada. Did you see that news clip where it's been suggested to pathologize resistance to these trial medicines? I'm not going to call them vaccines because they don't fit any criteria of a vaccine. They're trial medicines. So pathologize it and then prescribe psychiatric medication.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, roll on this new world. That's what I say. Enough, can it? Gee. So thank you so much for everything that you're both doing. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And thank you for your time. I'll put all the links below, and I'd love people to get on board and share this information out there with anyone that is a parent, or everyone knows children that are struggling probably at the moment with the whole system. So we need to really put a lot of focus and energy into creating exactly the type of systems that you're working with here. So well done. And I just wanted to mention too, I have a couple of books for kids, so I don't know if you'd be interested, but there are ones about developing self-worth, self-esteem, and the other one's about expressing your emotions. And I'd love to just get them out to kids so that kids will get an opportunity to see them. And they're absolutely extraordinary illustrations. I got the most beautiful illustrators on them as well. And so if that's something you're interested in for your school system, I'd love to be able to share these books, because it's no point in them just sitting there and not being utilised. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you both, and look forward to hearing more. Keep me posted about the development of these schools. I'd like to be able to continue telling people, how they're evolving.
Thank you so much, Medine.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Medine. So thank you again.
Lovely.